think.
Are we alive? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Blether with episode. Great to see you, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. And hello to all the guys who might be watching retrospectively as well. Feel free to get involved, ask us any questions if you're watching the recording, and get in touch. Dave, once again, fastest finger on the YouTube. Good evening to you, Dave Packerson. And Willis, we've got Willis, saying hello as well. Both alumni members of the Highland Whisky Academy. I'm sure there's plenty of other guys out there watching.
It's such a nice name, Willis. Where does that even come from? Every time I see your name pop up, Willis, I'm like, do you know what? That's a nice name. I'm going to ask him where it comes from, and then I just forget. Tell us where your name comes from. Obviously, your parents, but like.
Yeah, I just thought his dad was being cheeky and writing Willies, but maybe not. He spelled wrong. I don't know. Maybe not. Dave has got Glenglasser Port Soy in his glass, the PT Glenglasser, or the slightly PT Glenglasser.
It's really nice. Really
The new range is really picking up traction, isn't it? It's getting a lot of love.
It is. I love the Port Soy, and I love the Sanine. They're my two.
You're not local.
I am local. I just I just don't know how to pronounce it. I've never heard it called that before. Sanine.
It's a very local, very Port Soy thing. I think there's not many people out with Port Soy call it anything but Sandend.
No, I had no idea.
So what's in your glass, Kat?
Well, I decided to open. Well, I haven't opened it yet, but I decided I will open my Nickname. So I've had it sit for ages, and I was thinking earlier, what will I go for? So I went for that one. So that's what's going to be in my glass tonight.
Superb. I have gone for the turntable. Paradise Funk. We got into the shop the other day. Met Ali, who's one of the blenders there, and he came in and we had a chat about the product. We got some samples, so we're looking at potentially stocking that in the near future. So I thought a nice relaxed atmosphere to have a wee dram of that and see what that's all about. Guys, you missed him. You missed his visit, yeah. So Willis's uncle and grandfather were named Willis. Unfortunately, both killed in World War II.
So it's a family name. That's lovely that you're keeping it going.
Yeah, and make me feel really bad about calling you Willis. I do apologize for that. It was, of course, we're joking. So let's welcome our guest this evening. We have Katy Fenema, who is joining us. I was thinking so hard about pronouncing that right, and I completely botched it. We're going to take Katy on, who will tell us a little bit about herself. Good evening, Katy.
Great intro, Mike. Thank you very much.
I know. It's like I've even made sure the last thing we said was make sure to pronounce it right. I was slightly distracted by Kat's computer freezing there. She's
looking a little bit judgmental, but to be fair, I should just say in your defense, Mike, that I did say just think enema and add an F. So. Definitely add the F.
Definitely add the F. Yeah, it's not a silent F, is it? Good stuff. So Katy, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy the evening. And we would love to tell the guys about you, but who better to announce yourself than yourself? So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with whiskey?
No trouble. So yeah, I'm Katy Fenema. I own Braemar Highland Experience, which is based in the Cairngorms for those of you that aren't local. And we kind of have 4 branches to our business: guided walking, foraging, Balmoral, but most importantly, of course, whiskey. And that makes up a big part of our life, because as well as doing whiskey tastings, both in exclusive use venues and various other places in Braemar itself, we also have a whiskey consultancy business. So it's a varied life, and it's all things that I care passionately about. So I feel very lucky, really.
Great stuff. So for the guys who are watching, Braemar Highland Experience, you say you have 4 branches. Is foraging, going off into the hills out there and picking. Are you looking to create something from that foraging, or is it just kind of recognizing the plants and the herbs and things and what we can eat safely? Is that kind of experience, or is it let's gather up some berries and things and make something from it?
Yeah, so I try and tell a story behind each plant that we come across, whether that's something medicinal about its use in the past, in the present, whether it's something more about its properties, if you like. And sometimes, yeah, we just do foraging walks. We identify as we wander around, particularly the Braemar area. Other times, though, we combine it with a cocktail foraging workshop. Or a mocktail foraging workshop, because actually this has become quite a popular activity for children, which is really cool. So having foraged for a couple of hours, we go indoors, we warm up, and we do some bespoke cocktails, depending on what people are interested in. So, you know, that involves taking quite a lot of bottles, frankly, from my collection that I've built up over the year. And it's great fun. I just love it because, you know, you never come out with the same thing twice. It's a great way for people, I think, as well, just to get to know a bit about this environment. Actually, just before I came on this call, we had a request for a foraging walk next week, which sort of made me giggle because for those of you that aren't here right now, I mean, Braemar is a good 3-4 inches of snow. Actually, nothing what it would have been, you know, 50 years ago, 6-7 feet easily of snow then at this time of year. But yeah, there's not much green just now. So I wouldn't want to have a business that was run entirely on foraging in Braemar, that's for sure.
So is that quite seasonal then? I suppose it would change from season to season, wouldn't it? You'd get different plants coming through and different flavors.
Yeah, and as the season goes on, then you get into really interesting fungi as well, which is a whole other world and utterly fascinating for many reasons. So yeah.
Watchful what you're eating when it comes to the fungi, don't you? You could end up flying home.
Yeah, for those of you that haven't tried it, a porcini brandy is really something rather special. So can highly recommend. Wow. So, but yeah, you need to know what you're doing. It's not something to mess around with, that's for sure.
There's only 2 mushrooms that I know. One's chanterelles and one's penny buns. And even the penny buns I looked twice at. So I'm like, is that a penny bun?
Yeah, absolutely. But we've got loads, of course, of both of them here. Penny bun's not so good last year, but hopefully that means it'll be wonderful this year.
Yeah, I think they're quite prone to like maggots though, aren't they? They get eaten really quickly if you don't catch them. But chanterelles, I love chanterelles. It's Crossbill that do a chanterelle gin, isn't it? Their new small batch chanterelle. So yummy. They're just like little apricots. Love it.
Yeah. It's really fragrant on the nose. You get that chanterelle really quite prominent on that. And once you discover it, it's mushroom. There's very little else you can kind of detect. It's quite in your face, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I love actually chanterelle and an apricot brandy. Really bringing out those apricot flavors is really cool. I often think, actually, you know, when I pick chanterelles and I smell them, and you think about people living here, say 300 years ago, they would have picked up an apricot, I guess, and said, "Hey, this smells like a chanterelle," having never seen an apricot here 300 years ago. I kind of like that. Really, it's a bit like we've got an amazing forage plant here, pineapple weed, for, well, reasons if you smell it that would be fairly obvious. And I always think, you know, when pineapples started arriving, people would be like, God, it's like this pineapple weed that we have. I wonder
if they renamed it.
Yeah, only a hell of a lot more expensive. I mean, I think, you know, in the 1840s, they were selling for about £3,000 a pineapple. So yeah, you know, if that's not a reason to start foraging, I don't know what is.
I love foraging. I think it's such a in Scandinavian countries, everybody knows how to forage. And we have a lot of the same flora and fauna as your Scandinavian countries, but it's just not something that we do much here. It's a shame because I love foraging. I'm a massive fan of nettles. I put nettles into everything. They're like the best superfood ever. And they make a really nice cordial, which goes really well with gin. Well, depending on the gin. But we should all be foraging. Definitely. Yeah. Get your baskets out.
I used to forage for nettles because obviously. Yeah, absolutely. I used to forage for nettles because I was told that nettle tea and nettle shampoo cured baldness. So as you can see, it worked absolutely perfectly. You know, so yeah. I mean, it's obviously worked for you, Kat. You know, it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, we're just doing something differently with them. I don't know. I'll need to trade recipes.
Sorry, Katy, I forgot to ask what's in your glass tonight. What
is in my glass tonight? Well, yeah, what have I got? Actually, I picked up Bruichladdich. I'm a big Bruichladdich fan because I think they're a bit disruptors, aren't they, in the industry? And I like disruptor. But what I have here, turn around the other way, is Bruichladdich Bear Barley 2012. Why? Because a lot of my interest is into things like terroir, something that Bruichladdich really fascinated by, and that particular bear barley coming from just a few farms on Orkney. Bruichladdich, controversial, and what are we, 11 minutes in? But, Bruichladdich believe terroir really counts in the industry. And having tried a few new makes there, with barley from different fields, you do get a real difference. Same production techniques. So that's kind of cool. But that's actually not the main driver for why I've chosen it. I've chosen it because of the barley varietal, bear barley. I'm fascinated in undocumented distilling of the past. I'm not going to call it illicit distilling. I'm going to call it undocumented because people in these glens, remote valleys all across Scotland regarded distilling as their right. And they would have been using bear barley. We know bear barley's been grown for at least 1,000 years in this country, but probably 3,000 years at least, if not 5,000. And I love looking back to that past. And to me, this bear barley, it's sort of like porridge with pineapples and maple syrup on top. It's an extraordinary flavor, and it's really malty. It's far more malty than you would find from most whiskies that are produced in a similar fashion. And I find that fascinating. And plus the fact it's really yummy. So that's what I'm drinking. Sorry, not the short answer, but got there in the end.
Perfect answer.
That's right. When it comes to people talking about barley, I'll take the longest answer. I'm a massive terroir barley geek, so you can talk about that as much as you like.
Well, then in that case, I will talk about it slightly more because, I mean, Bruichladdich gives himself a real headache growing that barley. And that's because, well, we have geese landing in the northern Isles of Scotland. And so they've got to try and time their barley perfectly to be right before these geese arrive and gobble the whole thing up. And the nightmare's not over for them then, because the barley is really quite difficult for them, actually. In the mash tun particularly, they quite often end up with a porridge in the mash tun. In the mill, it destroys it. But they, despite the fact it gives a lower yield, they believe it's worth playing with. And I think I find that really special that distilleries are not always now going for the high alcoholic yield, that we've got distilleries that are striving for some really interesting flavors and pushing boundaries and looking back to old ways. That's, I find that really exciting.
It is that people are more aware and more keen to find flavors, aren't they? It's not just drinking for the sake of drinking. People want to be a little bit more into the craft of it, and the information now with social media and the internet, information is so easy to access or so available. I don't think we would have been having this conversation 20 years ago with anyone in the industry about how the different flavors. It was all just about maybe the brand and the look of the bottle, and maybe the cask would be about as far as it went. But now, production methods, fermentation, yeasts, and barley are really kind of buzzwords that people are really interested in, genuinely interested in as well.
Yeah, I mean, who thought you'd be able to say the word yeast? 20 years ago, the marketing we were seeing, and a lot of it incredibly false marketing. My kind of classic example that I always use is, oh, well, this is a nice peaty, smoky whiskey because our waters run over peat, and you wouldn't get away with that now. I think we're more realistic, and I remember talking I used to do a series of podcasts. I remember talking to Don Livermore from Hiram Walker and him saying, you know, I would never have been brave enough a few years ago to talk about yeast because yeast is not sexy, if you like. But now it's becoming, you know, a real fascination for people. And I think it allows us to innovate because, you know, at the end of the day, we are stuck with just these 3 ingredients.
Yeah.
So it's nice people are playing. It's nice people are playing Cat, I think, as well with your Nick Nean, and that we're seeing innovation there too. So
yeah, definitely. I think because we're making a consumer-driven product, I think there was just that time when it was just mass-produced. It was all about volume, and I think these small nuances are sacrificed a little bit for that. It was uniformity, getting out volume. I think now we're all kind of looking at. I think the consumer, you know, they're much more aware of what they're drinking and how the flavors are made. So I think distilleries are realizing this and definitely bringing back, or certainly looking at these little wee nuances like the yeast, like the barley strain and things. But yeah, on your point about the water and peat, I mean, it's the one, as a tour guide, it's the one thing that I hear week on week on week. You show them a kiln, you explain this is where the peat comes from, and you just see the penny drop. Like every time people are like, oh, it's not the water. Like maybe a little bit, but not to the extent that you're getting in a glass of whiskey. But I think it is marketing and branding, isn't it? It was this romantic story of this water, you know, filtering down through some sort of loch and isla, and yeah, that's definitely all changed now, but it's for the better because it does mean we're seeing more things like floor maltings, like what Nick Nean are doing, like what Bruichladdich are doing. It's an exciting time to be in whiskey. It's an exciting time to be drinking whiskey as well.
It certainly is. I mean, my nice Bruichladdich story related to water is, and it was the thing that really pulled me into the industry. Must have been about 20 years ago now. I was on Ireland. I was staying with James Brown. James Brown owns Octomore Farm right next to the distillery, and he supplies the distillery with the water that they use to dilute Bruichladdich whiskey. He's a bit of a dude, really. He's a strong man. He's a damn fine caber tosser. He is the village policeman. I think he used to work with the lighthouse as well. Yes, he did. And I was staying with him, and he took what he called a wee sweetie, which was quite a large full bottle actually of Octomore, and we went up to the burn that supplies Bruichladdich distillery together and drank some of that whiskey using water from the burn to dilute it, and it just felt so right somehow. I know I'm a day late, but that's romance right there. You know, putting those 2 things together, that's really special, I think.
Just you, a strong man, and a bottle of whiskey. That's all you need for a romance, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think you pretty much just described my Tinder profile there, to be honest. There's a lot to be said about terroir, though, I think. Sorry, Mike. I think there's a bit of delays.
I've been to the Octomore Spring, and there is something special. The kind of walk down through it's quite a steep kind of climb down into the shed. It's basically just a shed covering the spring, isn't it? And you go in and a couple of bottles on the shelf and a couple of tools, and James had his shepherd's crook when he took us down, and it's brilliant just to then have a dram in your hand off that and use that water to enjoy whiskey. For me, I'm on the fence with terroir, but there's certainly a sense of place where you're drinking it or where the distillery is has an impact on the flavor. Like I said, I'm on the fence on where the barley is grown having an effect. Certainly the barley type has an effect, but going through that distillation process. But we're all different, aren't we? We all have. Yeah. We won't get into an argument. We won't go into Mark Rainier's very opinionated views on it, but I'll sit on the fence on that. But yeah, definitely a sense of place where you're drinking it and how you're drinking it makes a big impact on that.
Yeah, if anyone listening wants some amusement, I would highly recommend actually looking at Mark Rainier talking, and he's now at Waterford Distillery, but it's fun to look in his comments in the past, both at Waterford and at Bruichladdich, and it's good to shake things up. And yeah, I think we'll never all agree. And I could be swung another way sometime into the future, I'm quite sure. But I think it's great to have the conversation. And I think it keeps everything interesting, really, with whiskey.
Yeah. I think when he went to Waterford, really, I think he went there with this vision of terroir, and he played with it in Bruichladdich. He felt kind of limited with the SWA rules at Bruichladdich, and for him to kind of really express his feelings on it. I just think every time they've missed a trick by then going into barrels. I think if you released a new make without that maturation process, maybe compare it or a sample with a bottle of the new make, you get a much clearer idea of what the barley or the terroir is doing to the whiskey. Because, you know, once we get into the cask, there's a lot of that factors kind of get overpowered or disappear or can be manipulated.
Yeah, I totally agreed. Yeah. For me, it's always been a case of, yes, trying that new make spirit and coming to conclusions at that point. I think after that moment, you've lost it. But, you know, also just being there when you're trying the beer and you know, the brewers at Bruichladdich as well will say they taste different flavors. They smell different flavors as well at that point, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that could always have open up a good conversation, isn't it? Terroir and but we've all got our own opinions about it. I like your definition, Mike, a sense of place. I think that's a really good way of.
Yeah. I didn't coin that phrase myself. That is,
I know, I've got his bloody book.
I think if we want Dave to come on as a guest, I'm not going to take credit for that.
You better
not. We've got Gilbert Ionescu watching. He's from Arbiki Distillery. So they're another distillery doing a lot of kind of cool, funky experimenting and playing with rye in particular. Yeah. So he's saying quite an amazing tasting experience. And he's commenting about a smaller LPA. I think that's in regards to the beer barley, which is kind of probably why this mass producers stopped using it. It wasn't giving them a lot of yield and kind of golden promise and a lot more before that kind of came along. So, yeah, I love what Arbiki are doing. We actually had Lisa from your team in Gilbert yesterday having a chat with us. So hopefully we'll have one of your team on the Blether in the future.
Missed everybody yesterday. It's what happens when I go to another job. You've got some cool. What have we got at Arbiki? Is it like holiday pods, like the glass fronted things? I saw a bit of Instagram the other day, but I was just scrolling. I kind of missed it. It's like Gilbert, you have to tell me. It's like little pods you can stay in, I think, at the distillery. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah. They're like modern Scandinavian spa kind of things.
Ah, nice. There, yeah.
Glamping, awesome. Glamping with a capital G, I think.
That's cool.
Anyway, sorry, distracted by Gilbert. We ran the Whisky Ambassador course, and Gilbert was on it before he got his job at Arbiki. So he keeps in touch. It's good to see him on watching.
I don't think I could be at Arbiki for too long. Their gin's dangerous for me. I'm afraid it's my go-to.
It's lovely. Which one is it? Is because there's the Kirsty's one, and then there's what's the other one called?
AK. AK's gin. It's Kirsty's, and I think I've got a couple of gins.
What's
your favourite one, Katy, or is it just anyone from Arbiki?
Actually both, but I'm a particular fan of Kirsty's gin. Yeah, I'm also a particular fan of a lot of gin, and then just a kind of, in brackets, tonic. That's a go-to for me. So yeah, big favourite.
You'll have to try Mike's Folkhouse gin. We'll have to get a sample over to you.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Never said that. That's a well-rehearsed answer, isn't it? Sample. Katy, you didn't start off in whiskey, did you? You had a professional career in another industry. How did that? Have you been able to transfer any skills over between music and whiskey?
For sure. So yes, my last life, I was a musician, first working in London as a session musician, but then traveling the world. And then in the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, I was associate principal over there. I think the thing about leaving home is you've got to take something with you, haven't you? And for me, whenever I was traveling as a musician, I would take a hip flask of whiskey, or maybe even a bottle of whiskey if I was going for it. And I'd share it with friends, and I would introduce it to friends. So it felt in a way like quite a natural progression to then move into the industry when I cared so passionately about whiskey, and it reminded me of home. And we had a small hotel in Braemar for a while where we did whiskey tastings there. And until quite recently, I was Whisky Ambassador at the Fife Arms in Braemar. We have a whiskey bar there with, well, the collection's sort of always changing depending on how thirsty people are, but somewhere between about 400, 500 bottles of whiskey in there. So yeah, really kind of a fun place to just be able to talk about whiskey, to deliver tastings in there and see people from all around the world coming, introduce them to whiskey. It feels like a real privilege, actually. So yeah, kind of fun. So a bit of a change, but we also, the Fife Arms in Braemar really focused on art, and that's expanding from not just artworks to music. I'd like it to expand further. So I was playing around for a while with whiskey tastings combined, matching with music, which was fun. Something I'd like to play around with a lot more in the future. You know, I still play a bit. I do quite a lot of trad music these days with my dad, playing piano. So it's definitely, I think, a slightly untapped area that would be fun to explore.
I've had the same kind of idea mulling around about pairing whiskey to a track, but the sensible head of me is always saying, but you know, a track can only be 4 minutes long, and if you're doing a tasting, you know, you got to finish that whiskey in 4 minutes. It could be a push for some people, you know, unless you just have it on repeat playing.
I was reading a study about how certain noises though can affect how you feel about something. So if you're like eating something or drinking something while a certain noise is playing, it can make you feel negatively about it. And then obviously the flip side, you know, if you play something that makes you feel nicer, then that affects how you interact with whatever you're eating or drinking. It's an interesting concept anyway. You wouldn't want to
I don't want to give away my secrets too much in a way, because if I get this out here, then everyone's going to know. But what I quite often do when I'm training staff is I give them a whiskey before we even start our training session and get them to write some notes on it, mark it out of 10 for them, and then carry on with the training session. And maybe half an hour later, put on a track of music and serve them the same whiskey. And it's really fascinating because you get very different tasting notes, very different scores. So
they don't know what the whiskey is, so it's both the same whiskey but blind. Okay.
Exactly the same whiskey, but they think it's something else. Yeah.
So guys, if you're watching and you go on one of Katy's courses, forget that. You know, it's completely different whiskies. But yeah, I think for me, I was thinking about this a lot when I seen that you were a musician moving into whiskey. They're two very similar industries in how we perceive them as people. I think there's such a variety of style of in both aspects, and personal choice is absolutely massive, and your mood as well. I don't think there's any two industries that could cross over quite as much. You know, a bad mood's a certain whiskey and a certain type of music, or there's music for listening to on your own. There's music that you'll have when you've got friends around. And they're so interlinked. There's so much connection between the two. I think there's a lot of scope for that to be developed further.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how you match your whiskey to the mood? And I find myself with some friends, I'll automatically reach for a bottle on the shelf. It just seems right. Whereas if you'd transposed that friend out and put another one in, it would never have worked. And I don't just mean for their whiskey tastes. It's more than that. There's more to it than that, which I think is quite interesting.
It's like a good whiskey pairing though. Oh, sorry. We've got like a delay. Like we only live like 20 minutes away from each other. And it's like, blooming Eurovision. You go first.
I was just going to say, I remember, and I looked for it on my Facebook, and I put a post out. I was at home on my own, and my wife was away, and I was sitting in the back garden, had the bonfire on, or the fire pit on, and I was having a dram, and I put a comment on Facebook saying, what music would you sit and listen to with this dram? And the difference of opinion was incredible. It was great fun. Just seeing what people would put with that. I'm going to have to go back and find that post, because it was good fun and read back on it.
It's interesting.
Kat, you were going to say?
I'm a big fan of whiskey and food pairings. I think it's a fantastic way of kind of highlighting a whiskey, and a great way of getting people comfortable talking about whiskey, because just with doing whiskey tastings, you'll maybe notice yourself, Katy, sometimes people get quite self-conscious about describing what they can taste, and they think there's a wrong answer. So try and convince them to. But sometimes they can't vocalize. They know it reminds them of something, but they can't quite put their finger on it. But if you pair that with food, it just kind of gives it another dimension. Just makes it more approachable and easier to talk about the flavors. If it's done well, obviously you've got to make sure it's done well. But I always find that really interesting, how you pair different whiskies with different foods.
I think I find it helps. It sort of liberates people at the start of a tasting. I mean, to be honest, I don't exactly say to them, what are you getting from this whiskey? It's not a high pressure environment, but if they want to share them, I always enjoy hearing, and it, it doesn't tend to chime with other people in the room. It's quite often quite different, and that's, at the end of the day, that's down to the fact that your sense of smell, it's memories from your past. 85-90% of flavor, they say, is your sense of smell, and an aroma is different for every person. And I think when you say that, it's quite a liberating thing. But there's also, and I cannot remember the title of the book, but it's really fascinating because it will talk about flavors, aromas that foods share in common, and they're often, completely off on a different scale. So while someone might get lemon, another person might get oyster from the same, and it's the same compound that's coming through there. I think once you start putting it a bit like that, ease, trusting yourself is, I think, really an important thing. You must have interesting discussions between the two of you when you're trying to write tasting notes for whiskies in the shop.
I don't think we ever get the same thing, though, do we? We were playing around with little samples that you were going to use for doing a peat kind of discovery tasting the other night. And my taste notes were always very much agricultural based. It's like, oh, that's the same disinfectant we use for cleaning out the kennels. Well, that's silage brie. Well, that... But nobody ever gets the same ones as me. But as you say, it's like, because, it's all linked to memory, and everybody's got different experiences. So they're always gonna differ.
I love hosting tastings for people from Europe or Australia or America, because they come up with some taste. I've had dingo's piss as a tasting note from some Australians. I have no idea what that smells or tastes like, but I can imagine, and it wasn't a whiskey that they enjoyed very, very much. So but all these, like, cloudberries and lemongrass and all these stuff, that or bison grass is another one, that you kind of open our eyes to see, okay, well, and it makes you want to find out why they're getting that note, and and that opens up a whole new conversation about where they grew up, what is that particular herb or flavor or smell, and try to find out how we can connect it to something that I would recognize or somebody else in the room can recognize, and try to cross that bridge to say that's why you're both getting that different aromas, or it's the same aroma, but how you're perceiving it differently, how you're remembering it differently. It's an amazing topic.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to play with that is great fun. Actually, I use flavor wheels because I always think vocabulary is a bit of a problem, actually. And just having words in front of you, I think, is helpful. I don't think it leads you too much. I do find it helpful, but actually also, goodness, I'm back to Don Livermore again. But he is a bit of a dude. His Canadian whiskey wheel, if you're interested in the scientific side of things, is really fascinating. It's out there if you Google it, because it talks about specifics in flavor compounds, which is really great fun to play with. one of my best friends, Kat, is actually also he's quite he's in farming, and came to a tasting that I was doing recently, and we got onto a whiskey which I think should remain nameless, but it was a very, very fine dram, and how do I put this politely? I don't think I can. So he described the main flavor notes as rumen. So for those of you that don't know what rumen is, it's kind of the contents from a cow's stomach. And he meant it entirely positively. So I can relate to your agricultural flavor notes very nice.
That's it though, because like straight away I'd be like, oh yeah, I totally get that. But everybody else would be like, sorry, what? But yeah, no, it's interesting. We do like a new make session at the distillery that I work at, that Mike's been part of several times now, and it's always great fun. We've got one guy who sometimes is on this, Callum he's called, and he nosed it and he said, oh, it's like fish, and nobody had ever said that the new make smelled like fish before, and I was like, I'm not gonna say you're wrong, but like fish, are you sure? But what it meant was he does like gilly kind of work. And what he meant was like it's the smell of like fresh outdoorsy water, you know, like when you're fishing, you're just that really kind of fresh kind of river water. That I completely understood when he explained it a bit more, but I was like, yeah, fish? Are we calling it fish? But
do you remember Fishki? Not that I ever tried it. Was it Bruichladdich again? We seem to be going through common themes. I think it was as a joke, and I think it's almost impossible to get your hands on these days. They actually did mature some new make in a barrel that had held fish, and of course that was the downfall of Campbelltown to a great extent. Of course, it was all, but yeah, that they'd used less desirable casks during the tough early start of the 1900s, that they'd used casks that had held fish in the past. So yeah, maybe it's out there somewhere.
There was was it the Speyside Whiskies came out with a slogan about it, an advertising campaign about the Campbelltown whiskies tasting like fish, to kind of self-promote. It would have been Highlands at the time, but self-promote the whiskies of Glenlivet region as being purer and cleaner and tastier, and not like the fish-laden spirit of the Campbelltown malts or something like that. There was
exactly that
slander going on.
Yeah, final nail in the coffin for poor Campbelltown. Although they're getting back.
I think they were just trying to catch up, weren't they? They kind of, was it after the recession or the first whiskey loch, and they just kind of, a lot of them had stopped production, and then it picked up again, and they just thought, grab whatever cask we can get whiskey into it, and they kind of cut a lot of corners to try and get back on the market, and unfortunately they apart from Springbank and maybe one or two others, they kind of just cut their own throats.
Yeah.
We've got Debbie Weir watching on Facebook, Kat. She's wondering what distillery you work at.
Are you actually wondering, or do you just want me to say it so you can take a drink? Yeah, I work at Glengarry, so everyone have a dram. Yeah. So, Katy, every week we accidentally say Glengarry, and so I think it was Rick actually that said he was watching tonight, and then we just say have a dram every time we say Glengarry, because it happens a lot. So, yes, I work for Glengarry. Cheers, everyone.
So you mentioned you've done a few podcasts, Katy, and if people are watching tonight and they want to maybe catch up on some of the podcasts that you've done, where could they find you?
So I was for a while the podcast host, goodness, it was during that awful time that no one talks about, COVID, for Edinburgh Whisky Academy. So you'll find some of my podcasts on their website, and it's been something I've been developing also for the Fife Arms. So watch this space into the future. It's been great fun actually playing around with podcasts. I've had a blast. Met some fascinating distillers, some fascinating people. So yeah, I feel very lucky.
I love a podcast. I love putting a podcast on while I'm cooking dinner, because you can just like soak the information in like a plant, like while you're busy, and just listen to all all the whiskey knowledge, I'll have to check out your podcast.
Please do.
Are they available on Spotify or?
They are on Spotify. Please don't ask me to name all the other platforms they're available on. Did you see me even struggle to find the word platform there? I was trying to pull it out there. Technology is not my strong point, I have to say, but yes, they are there on Spotify. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's cool.
So, great stuff.
We're to, I know I'm conscious of time because I don't want to ask you too many questions and then make you go over your time. I keep talking.
Well, one thing I was going to ask, obviously Bruichladdich has got a special place with you in your heart and in your palate. Any others that stand out when you walk into a bar? What do you kind of tend to lean towards?
I will, when I stop tonight, pour myself a glass of red wine. Sorry, am I allowed to say that? Will that just end this instantly by saying that? And I love whiskey that has been that has been entirely matured in red wine casks. One of my real go-tos right now is Raasay Distillery. I'm a massive Raasay fan.
Yeah.
I love everything they stand for. I love the fact that they, Raasay, just off the island of Skye, tiny little island, 14 miles long, 2 miles wide, maybe. It's a clearance island. It was cleared during the Highland clearances. I'm going off tack, but I promise I'll get back to their whiskey in a moment. And the opening of Raasay Distillery, I want to say 2017, but I might not be accurate there, brought people back to the island, and young people now are staying on the island. They're not leaving it because they're really excited to work at this distillery. And Raasay na Shia is their main single malt that's quite straightforward to get your hands on. It's made up of 6 different whiskies that are married together, and I won't bore you with all of it, but some of it's peated, some of it's not peated. And part of the component of that is matured in a red wine, a Bordeaux cask. Where do I sign? Actually, I've just bought a few casks for clients. Just wonderful stuff. And I find it really interesting when I'm doing a tasting at Bertie's at the Fife Arms to pull it off the shelf, because we do have each individual component there, and to be able to turn to a client and say this is a 3/4-year-old whiskey, it's no age statement, but I think 3 to 4 years old, blows my mind, if I'm entirely honest. I think that's amazing, and I think it turns a lot of our clients' views around on what's important when they're buying a whiskey. And plus the fact it's just amazing stuff. You're getting really wonderful sort of dark berries, a bit of raspberry in there, really amazing mouthfeel. So I bought a few bottles for our private collection. Actually, that's a lie. I bought it for some of our whiskey tastings for Braemar Highland Experience, but it might have some of it might have moved over because I love it so much. And it's a real go-to for me, their peated version of that. Yeah, wonderful. And I see that people are saying oily coastal. You get as well, because of all of Raasay being matured on Raasay, you get this wonderful coastal note coming from it too. So that's a real tick box. I could go on. I could probably go through almost every single distillery in Scotland. But what I find quite interesting is that I really wish I could go back in time and write a diary of what I'm drinking and what I feel about it, because I'm sure if you ask me again probably in 10 minutes, but also, in a year's time, I will have very different views. I feel like my tastes are constantly changing, which is, I think, quite fascinating, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a common cycle, like a generic common cycle, where people get introduced to whiskey with something like a Glenfiddich, a Glenlivet, Glenmorangie, something that's fairly mainstream but really delicate and light and very good. And when they get used to that kind of whiskey, that space side, maybe I want something a bit punchier, so we develop that Highland twang, or maybe they go into the Islas, they push their palate to the boundaries, and then actually as they get older, they realize, actually, no, I want more of that gentle, kind of more delicate stuff again, and they kind of come full circle. We see that a lot with speaking to people in the shop. But obviously everyone's different, and I think the casks available now are incredible. I've just poured myself a wee sample of Chinkapin from Glenallachie, and nobody'd heard of Chinkapin 5 years ago, and it's such a beautiful dram and something that's really kind of changing American oak for me is doing. And I think Rossi have Chinkapin in their makeup as well. It's one of the three cask styles.
They do indeed. Yeah, it's amazing stuff. I think it's the one that's particularly flying off the shelves for them. I think Chinkapin's going to be big. I've heard, not that I've ever been able to try, but that if you get an acorn from a Chinkapin tree, you can just eat it as it is. It's really sweet. I'd love to try, actually. And I think that does come through really nicely from their Chinkapin finishes, and yeah, Glenallachie too.
Do you think guys like Rossi, maybe Ardnamurchan and there, Thought of Vague, these guys are really smashing down that barrier of age statement being a big thing?
I'd really like to think so. And I'd like to think it's, when we talk about whiskey, that people are beginning to challenge the theory that, age is the important thing. I quite often do a theme in my tasting, but I don't always identify it at the start. And maybe I don't even tell clients initially what they're drinking, because I just want to challenge their expectations of what makes good whiskey. And, if I had someone else's credit card and I was out buying whiskey, I wouldn't probably be buying the most expensive whiskies out there. I really like playing with young whiskies. I really like playing with relatively young whiskies that were also distilled 30, 40 years ago. I find that really fascinating and a really great way to kind of dabble into the whiskies of the past, just having a bit of a play on some of the auction sites and picking up. I bought my dad for Christmas Glenmorangie 10-year-old, the first whiskey I ever drank, actually, with my dad. I won't tell you what age it was for my dad's sake, but it was, from the 1980s when I would have given it away when I was drinking whiskey with him. And it is just like going back in time, actually, trying that bottle. So different to the Glenmorangie. It's classic, isn't it, now? That's the equivalent of today. Sort of also challenges the whole idea of whether something happens to that whiskey in the bottle as well over time, if it changes in flavor. We'll never really know.
Glenmorangie was my way into whiskey. It was my grandfather, and I just remember it as being, I don't know, it's like linked to the memories of him. But I went back and tried it recently because I hadn't had it in forever. But Mike, you often make this point of like Glenfiddich, Glenmorangie, it's always on the shelf. So you just think, I won't, because it's always going to be there. So I just bought a bottle of it to try for like nostalgia. It just tasted so different from how I remembered it. Obviously, it probably is different spirit because I was drinking like, that's a while ago. But yeah, very, very different from what I remember it being like. It's still a cracking dram, but not the same as what I remember anyway. So, but yeah, quite often it's something like Glenfiddich or Glenmorangie that's kind of people's entry level into whiskey in Scotland anyway, I think. But it was kind of the staple big names in the household, wasn't it? Everybody's father or grandfather had one of those ceremonial bottles they brought out for births, deaths, and marriages, Hogmanay, and it was put back again after you got a wee dram.
Oh, it was a bit more in our household, I think, actually. My mum used to, actually, my first introduction to whiskey was Glenmorangie and Athelbrose. Which, for those of you that don't know, it's toasted oats and some whipped up cream and a bit of honey and then some whiskey. It's a very, very beautiful thing. Not maybe a breakfast porridge type, but something quite different for later
something
on.
Before your school, yeah. We had we still have people to this day asking about the Gordon MacPhail produced an Athelbrose liqueur, and it stopped, I think, about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years, but still people look for it. It was really nice. It was kind of that real oaty honey liqueur that hasn't been replaced, and we heard rumors or rumblings that it was going to come out again, but I think that's been quashed with the the change of direction that Gordon MacPhail have taken on.
Well, that's an opportunity for someone there, surely.
Yeah.
Do you know, like most distilleries used to have their own kind of liqueur or kind of, you know, something like that they sold in store, but very few of them seem to do that anymore. I think it's kind of maybe died out a little bit.
Cleaning, it's a messy business.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Rick's asked a question. Guided walking all year, Rick. We do guided walking all year round. There are times when there's kind of too much snow to get very far, but yeah, we're out and about all the time. No day is complete for me without being out somewhere, whether that's running with the dogs or out with clients.
Where do most of your clients come from? Are they Scotland based or are they overseas?
There's a wide variety. I would say there's quite a lot from the US, probably make up about 60-70%. There's actually particularly lovely. I mean, one of the really lovely things from COVID, if there can be such a thing, was that we get a lot of repeat business now from people within the UK. You know, they realize how easy it is to come to our area. Actually, sleeper train up is a pretty magical thing. If you're coming from London at King's Cross and you get on the train and you get off at Aviemore, you get off at Perth, and you're in a different world. So yeah, Europe, but a lot from the US and quite a lot, particularly from London, actually. It's great fun. It's great fun to meet different people every day, and you know, you learn about their lives too. It's an amazing insight, and it's really cool to be able to introduce them to the landscape here, whether that be the biggie details or the wee ones. They're all equally fascinating.
Imagine if that was your first trip up north, though. You're coming out from London for the first time in a sleeper train, and you step out in like Braemar, and it's just hills and whiskey and foraging. That'd be awesome. That'd be a great first kind of experience in Scotland.
I think doing that drive over Glen Shee, which is our highest through route in the UK, 670 meters. If you get out at the summit there and you just breathe in the air, I mean, it still blows me away every time I drive over that route. And I think, goodness, I'm nearly home. I feel so privileged to live where I live. You know, it's a place my family have lived for, we know, at least 300 years. So probably an awful lot longer in all reality. It's a very special part of the world. Highly recommend it.
It's beautiful. You're very lucky.
Yeah.
We'll have to go up and see you and go foraging with you at some point in the future.
With pleasure. We can do some cocktails as well if you fancy it.
Yes,
Sounds
sign
great.
up for that. Yes, definitely.
I'll nominate you for the mocktail. You'll be driving.
Mocktails are not always such a bad thing. I think I'll be able to prove that.
No, that's fine. I'm the worst lightweight ever. I'd have to drive. So we can't even home otherwise. That's fine.
We can stay over. I'll bring the tent. We'll camp.
That's what to do. Staff day out. That would be good.
Bring your own tent. Yeah. Kate, I understand. I realise you've got another appointment on at 8 o'clock, so we're going to let you go. Kat and I will stick around and continue the chat for a wee bit. I'm sure we'll manage to think of some things to say. But thank you so much for taking time out. It sounds like you're mad busy and hectic. I'd love to get you back on.
Definitely.
And we could spend a bit more time chatting with you. And yeah, genuinely would love to come up and see you. I've been to the Fife Arms a couple of times. One was pre the closure and refurb, but I've only been in once after. So it's guys, if you haven't been, get yourself up.
I've never seen it.
Having a look at the whiskey collection alone is worth it, and seeing the deer with the angel's wings is well worth it.
What on earth you're talking about there, Mike? Unless you to the
I'm going to leave it at that. You have to go up and see it.
Yeah, the deer don't all fly around with wings, but they do in the Fife Arms, and then not after even a few drinks, but you know, before them.
Yeah.
But thank you, guys. It's been a real pleasure. It's been lovely to chat a bit, and I'd love to come back and do this again sometime.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Please do. Keep in touch. Thanks very much, Katy. We'll see you very soon, I hope.
Have a lovely evening, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
I've just kind of thrown you into this now, Kat. I didn't tell you we're going to stick around and have a chat.
Usually when we say bye, 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 you press the button and we're off live. And I just relax and start speaking absolute nonsense. I'm very conscious.
Just imagine we've done that. Imagine we've just come off live and we have we'll just talk the usual drivel that we normally talk when we're in the green room afterwards. Because that Rick Johnson guy, he's a bit of a neat, isn't he?
Thank God for Rick. You're always asking such good questions. Well done you for being a good sport.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for that, Rick.
He just asked another one. You should make foraging. Oh, this is more of a statement than a question. We should make foraging a part of the Highland Whisky Academy.
We should, and I would do that for you. I would do that. I love foraging. I need to get back.
It's pretty cool. It's one of the things I've actually got written down. We touched on it was the illicit distilling that went on, and Katy does some excellent. I've heard some really good stuff about her tours where she takes you up and kind of shows you where the stills would be.
Yeah.
And that's the side of the illicit distilling that I'm really interested in is what they use to flavor, because back in pre-maturation in the days of the Highlanders, so guys, I'm speaking to you guys at home now, but back in the days of the Highlanders kind of they wouldn't mature it. The barrels were storage only, but 9 times out of 10, there we go.
This is a really good book. So it shows you all the botanicals that they used to use for flavoring whiskey when it was created. I'll take it in and show you, but it's all the kind of natural
that's amazing. Yeah. So that's how they would flavor it, wasn't it? They off the still, and they would cram herbs and fauna and flowers and things to give a flavor to it. So it's kind of like a gin,
whiskey
in
gin.
a way. It's kind of like a malted gin, which is pretty cool.
Yes,
Willis is asking, what's the other mealy pudding we had, savoury and salty? I would say Bros would be my guess. I don't know if that's a local thing. Did you have Bros?
I don't think so. It's like
it's effectively uncooked porridge, but you'd have it with either sugar or salt, in a splash of hot water.
Oh, my grandpa used to have his porridge with a wee splash of salt and hot water. He liked it like that, but I didn't know that was Bros. So maybe that's what that was.
Well, there's Athol Bros, which we were talking about. That's the sweet with the cream and the honey and all that.
That's yum.
But, yeah, I was given Bros, without the Athol, so without the sweeteners. It was. But I'm not sure what the other meaning.
Skirley's awesome. It's not a pudding, but it's like literally just oatmeal fried with onions and beef fat. That's really yum.
We had it at the meal. Had it at the meal for the Whisky Academy. We had haggis.
Like mealy pudding isn't like a white pudding, like stuffing. Is that what you had? Yeah. Like a mealy Jimmy?
I can't remember. Now, Willis was quite a social animal when he was at the Whisky Academy the first time, so he might be mixing this up with one of his nights out, having a meal with Keith and the guys.
Maybe you weren't invited.
I wasn't invited to that one. No. I got invited afterwards for a drink, but it might have been if it was the sherry dinner where we did the food pairing. The only pudding style, or we had the haggis and chorizo balls. I can't think of a mealy pudding that we had. My memory might just be completely deserting me at this time, because that meal has changed. It's evolved since then.
You didn't have like it for pudding like Cranachan. There's some great oat pudding chat going. I know it's we've devoted a good 10 minutes to talking about different oatmeal based foods.
It's great. I mean, the viewing figures have gone up all of a sudden. You know, we're talk about oats and porridge and stuff. We had it on the Sunday and then made it for the meal at the cut. I'm going to delve into the archives for this one, Willis, and figure out
must be Scurly. If you made it, it must just be Scurly, surely. Yeah. Like if you had it on a Sunday, it must have been a roast dinner, and you had Scurly.
Callum, we were talking you up at this chat. I don't know what you're talking about. Terminator and Katy.
Don't stifle our creativity. This is all just building on future proper quality chat.
Rick is asking, he's got a very important question, Kat. How's the fundraising going for the new shelves? Because you seem to be on the verge of collapsing.
Did you notice that? I keep trying to move. I've just seen how bad they look. I can see it behind me. And I was thinking earlier, Rick, shit, that looks really, really bad. I have some shelves in my basket online. I just haven't done anything about it yet. But this time next month, there'll definitely be some new shelves on the go. Scurly.
That's it. Scurly, yeah.
So you had Scurly. So that's literally just oatmeal and onions fried. But it's like food of champions. But you only get that up here, which I didn't realise until I moved away.
Yeah, I don't remember us having that with the sherry dinner.
That's a banging combination. Sherry and Scurly. How did you make that work?
Scurly.
Shirley. Oh my god.
Sure, it's like Sean Connery having
oatmeal. Do you know we have these conversations while sober? It's
yeah. Stick around for an hour, guys. It could get interesting.
It'll get worse.
It'll get worse. No, I'm really looking forward to the Academy this year. We in March we've got some new additions and some new fun stuff. We've got blending masterclass. We are. What else have we got that's new? We've got Aim for Teeth. We're going back to Little Brown Dog. We've got Glenfarclas on board, doing some really, really cool stuff this year. And for those who haven't been on the Whisky Academy, look us up. You can find us on Facebook or on the website. And the guys who are asking us questions and abusing us live, a lot of these guys have been on it, so ask them about it. And we're fully booked for March, but we've got 4 spaces left for September, I think.
Awesome.
So that should be good. It's something you're just your gaff this year as well.
Yes, you'll be over to see me at Glengarry and Ardmore. So you'll get me for both of those experiences. So yeah, I'm working on something for you guys at Glengarry just now. And then we'll have a good rake around Ardmore, which you don't usually get to do. So it's closed to the public. But luckily Mike knows somebody. So the guy's going to get to go and have a proper look around. Oh yes, it's the first Blether without Killian. It is.
Yeah.
Well, first for a while.
At least for a while, yeah. His routine has changed slightly. So he's now going down about 7 o'clock. So he's down a wee bit earlier. I could make a little stick figure of him and just kind of hold it up every now and then if you want. We'll make what do you call those little figures?
Like a marionette doll. Like a what did you say?
Is it a pod or pob or pog?
I don't know. Is this like a toy?
Yeah.
I've only got teenagers.
The big heads and the little bodies.
Okay.
We'll make a wee one of Killian and hold him up every now and then.
The mascot.
Rick, you're very observant today. Are you?
He is. He's on it, but it's morning time for Rick, so he's literally like up and at it. Like whereas we're end of the day. Willis, I love Ardmore too. Like we should form a club if that doesn't already exist. Definitely.
Good evening, Don Miguel, watching from Spain, from Barcelona.
Buenos noches. Is that right?
You're very sure.
Tell me if that's right, Don. Buenos noches.
Yeah. and interesting that he's got Barcelona and then Spain in brackets.
Well, do you know what? we might not have known. So thank you.
Well, the natives there, sometimes the Catalonians are quite political about where Barcelona is, if it's in Spain or if it's in Catalonia. But we're not here to talk politics.
Let's not get into that.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dawn. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, welcome.
Unfortunately, you've missed Katy, but you can still listen to Katy and me.
It's not me.
Yeah, that was you. Yeah.
I think my name's changed about 10 times while working for you. I went from like Cat to the distillery Cat via something else less pleasant. Let us know what you're drinking, Dawn, and what your favourite whiskey is. If you're new to the chat, let us know what's in your glass.
Absolutely. Yeah, Willis mentioned earlier on that Don saying good Spanish. Good Spanish.
Thank you.
Maybe that's French, isn't it?
Gracias.
Gracias.
Did you not do Spanish at high school?
I did it. I did French. Could you tell?
Do you know the only thing I remember from my high school Spanish, and it'll tell you how old I was when I did it, was I've just forgotten now. That's awful. Me llamo Catherine, tengo 16, which means my name is Catherine. I'm 16 years old. I think, Dawn. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But that's the only thing I remember.
We're going to work out how many drinks Dawn's had before he joined us tonight with that one.
Well, my Spanish is probably just very, very poor, so I wouldn't judge it on that.
He's got some elements of Isla. Oh, brilliant.
Nice.
I do like the elements of Isla. Which is it because there's a couple of expressions. We've got there's the individual distillery ones that I haven't seen for a wee while, but sherry cask, bourbon cask, or the cask edit.
We're asking Dawn a lot of questions at once.
We are.
He's typing furiously. I was correct in my Spanish. Okay, correct. So I'm no longer 16 years old. It might shock you all, but at least
you have a son that's 16 years old. That's crazy.
I do have a son that's 16 years old. I don't know how to say my son is 16 years old in Spanish, though. I'm tapping out there. But
anyway, it's telling about Willis. Right back at the start of the chat, one of Willis's first comments, or one of our first comments, was when we're talking about how your taste changed. Willis is now starting to enjoy peated whiskey, awesome. I remember having the conversation right at the start of the first academy, and he wasn't a peated fan. We've had a few guys like that. Dave Fackerson, if you're still watching, was another one who was.
He's still not a massive fan.
He's not massive, but he's getting there. He's willing to try it now, and that I think is good enough for us. As and I think for a long time people drink a certain type of whiskey, and that's what they like, and that's. They tend not to. They might switch within a distillery from a sherry to a bourbon, or vice versa, and maybe try a port cask or something like that, or even a region. So stick to Speyside. But it's great that hopefully we've helped in that journey that opened your eyes to, and it's all about getting the liquid into your glass and trying it. I think, and
it is. I think sometimes it's just that one not bad experience, but like you maybe start with a peat that's not your flavor profile. Maybe we're talking about this a little bit with your peat masterclass, like the different kinds of peats and how they taste different. So, an Isla peat might not be for you, but it doesn't mean that Highland peat won't be for you. Start small and kind of work your way up. So some people come to peat later in life, and some people move away from it later in life. It's just judge it on its merit, not on what you think it's going to taste like, I think.
Absolutely. Callum's just said that, and I remember the Stram, it was Murray McDavid, it was a 16-year-old Ella chick, single cask that we had with Ben Chambers at the Highlander, and it was phenomenal. Really, really good. And I remember we had a chat. Was it on a Blether, Callum, that you then opened it again? So obviously, this was near the end of the day. And the guys had been to the Coburn Warehouse, they'd been to Glenallachie, been to the Cooperage, and then we're doing a pretty free-flowing tasting with Ben at the Highlander. So Callum bought it. It was probably about, I'm going to guess it was about a year after that he actually went back and opened it. And I remember doing it on a video chat. I think it must have been a Zoom chat we were on. And he said it was equally as good then. I think there is something to be said about trying a whiskey at the place or in a conversation or, during a great day, maybe down at the rugby when Scotland aren't robbed out of a win, or something when we're doing
totally
really
robbed.
But yeah, we remember that great time, and sometimes the whiskey lets you down afterwards when you try it on its own. But that, thankfully for this wasn't the case here. Callum's just, we got it right. Yeah, that's exactly how the story went. A bit boozy, it was in the blether. Yeah. So, Willis, Rick is asking which Octomore you had. Octomores, yeah. Octomores are funny.
Hang on, Willis, Willis went from no peat to like straight up to Octomore. Like you went up the ladder fast, Willis.
I think he had Ardmore in between.
Oh, he did. He did have Ardmore. I'm glad that Ardmore was your entry into
probably the lightest peat whiskey in Scotland to the heaviest. But we talked about this during our tasting, and the peat journey we called it not all peat tastes the same, and we looked at Islay peat, we looked at the Highland peat, and Orkney peat, but also cut points and strengths and a load of other factors that make the age. And we started off. I've never started off a whiskey tasting with Octomore before. We started off with the 14.3, which 216.5, I think, ppm it was. But when we did it, the guys in the room nosed it blind from 1 to 6, and the two that they thought was the peatiest was a 35 ppm Benromach and a 55 ppm Benriach, were the two that most people thought was. Only one person guessed the Octomore as being the peatiest.
Okay. And did they have the lower ABVs as well, those two? Benromach would have had...
both 4-6, yeah.
That's interesting.
So, ppm is just a number. Just like age. It's just a number. It doesn't, don't look at it on the outside and think, oh, that's going to be... I have had some Octomores that you need a fork and knife to drink because of that chewy with the peat. But, this wasn't one of them. It's quite interesting. A lot of people get really focused on ppm, and I remember being Islay for a few times, and whereas over here probably the most common question you guys get asked is what would be your
in the shop?
Yeah,
the most commonly asked question.
Yeah.
Do you know what the most commonly asked question at my distillery is? What's the oldest whiskey you've got? What's that?
How many fire extinguishers are there?
That was only Tony that got asked that one. No, what's your oldest bottle of whiskey is what I get asked, or oldest cask is what I get asked.
I can guarantee you at Brookladdie or any of the peaty guys, it's what's the strongest ppm you've got.
What's their strongest ppm?
What's the highest?
Things like Port Charlotte and Octomore. Do you think there's like kind of like a, I don't want to say like bravado, but like it's like I've got to try the highest ppm. I've got to the bigger the better. It shows that I'm like a proper hardened whiskey drinker. Do you think that's an element to it as well, or do you see it?
Without doubt, I think Port Charlotte. When we talked to the guys at Aquavite Barflies, Roy Duff, he spoke about this quite a lot. It's Port Charlotte maybe taking the mantle as the gateway to Islay. Pretty much it's a dram that you can get regularly, and it ticks all the right points. It's got that coastal briny, it's got the peat smoke, a little bit of TCP, but no overpowering. And it's kind of taken that away from guys like maybe Ardbeg 10, who are maybe venturing too much marketing. But I think Port Charlotte, if you imagine Islay, that's kind of what you expect to get. Octomore, I think Jim McEwen did that out of spite because he was told he couldn't do it. So he said, well, you were going to make something like insanely peaty. Yeah. And I think he gets the peat from Inverness, and they had to commission a like special system for doing it. because they've never done it before. They never even attempted to get the peat that high. But it continues. So you dry the barley to a certain point, because once it gets dry, it doesn't, or gets to certain moisture content, it won't absorb the smoke anymore. So they then they put out a sprinkler, soak it again while the peat is going through it, and then it absorbs again. Then they keep like intermittently soaking it, so it's continuously absorbing the smoke.
Wow.
And that's how they get the ppm so high. But I think during the process, instantly the distillation process, you cut that in half straight away, don't you? And then maturation you're looking about up to 80% loss of that ppm. So what's in the glass? What's 80% of 220?
Yeah.
It's a lot less.
It is. I think sometimes, though, numbers just help people identify a level, don't they? They don't necessarily need to understand the hows and whys and what it actually means. It's just the difference of saying loads less. 200 just sounds higher than 15. So I guess it's useful in that respect, but in any other way, it's not a true indicator of what you're getting in your glass, really, I suppose.
I wonder how many people, and there's the education thing. It's down to us, either as a tour guide or somebody who speaks to people about training them in whiskey, or whether you're a distiller or whatever your role in the whiskey. Is up to us guys to kind of try and get people a bit more aware of it and say it's not just a number. It's not just because it's 200 ppm doesn't mean it's going to blow your mind off and you're going to be eating an ashtray for the rest of the day. Yeah.
It's that one thing when people walk into the store, though, or into the distillery. It's, I don't drink anything from Islay, and straight away you just can't wait to say to people, okay, you don't like peat, that's cool, but not everything on Islay is peated. Please give the other one, give them a little chance.
It's when you just wish you had a Bruichladdich in your hip flask. You say, "I'll try that."
Yeah, let's have a go like a Buna or a Bruichladdich, and let's give it a bit of an experiment. But it's years of bad marketing and branding as well. It's just like Katy said, that whole notion of peatedness from water, that's just years of advertisement and branding and creating a romantic story. So, I don't judge anybody for thinking these things at the same time, but like you say, it's nice to maybe just give people a chance to change what they think and experiment and learn something new and discover a new favorite dram, because that's always my favorite thing, when people love finding new whiskey that they can take home and enjoy.
Yeah. Dave on YouTube asking how do they get the ppm number? Do you know the scientific way, or could we do layman's terms?
I don't, because it's it's not something anybody's ever asked me before. And when I saw that question pop up, I was like, I don't actually know how they get that. Do you know the answer?
Not how there'll be a way of measuring it. I guess there's instruments they have. I know crisp maltings, they blend up rather than blend down the barley to introduce the peat. So basically they'll peat whatever they peat, they heavily peat it, and then they add it to unpeated barley to create that level of ppm is parts per million, so it's phenolic parts per million. So 200 ppm, 200 of those phenols are peated per every million. So there's 999,200 phenols are unpeated.
You're going into maths here.
So I mean that's how they measure it. So it's phenolic parts per million. So one ppm would be 1 part per million is peated, and the other isn't peated. But what they're doing at crisp maltings, and I guess this is practiced across the maltings, is they'll make all the unpeated barley, and then they'll have certain batches will be peated, and the distillery phones up and say, I want something that's 45 parts per million. They'll blend through the peated into the unpeated, rather than going in and saying, right, we need to peat a whole batch of barley at 45, because that's not sustainable. It's not good for the peat. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the distiller or the maltons, because they can get it wrong and then they ruin that whole batch potentially. So they have a batch of unpeated, a batch of peated. They blend them to get a little bit like whiskey blending. to get that right level of ppm. So a lot of the barley that is in a peated barley or a peated whiskey would be unpeated.
Yeah.
It's just added into. There's it's a roundabout way of answering your question, Dave. If you want to know more, get Mike Billet's book, read it.
I need to get that book.
It's good. It's one I've used it as a reference guide rather than a book. I've started dipping into it and reading bits here and there. I will go and read that specific page and get back to you with a more definitive answer, Dave. Willis, were you sleeping 10 minutes ago? Willis, how's the whiskey shelf, Kat?
Don't look, it's collapsing behind me. It's more of a whiskey kind of, I don't know, sag than a shelf.
Is that an Ardmore Portwood, Kat?
It is.
So good.
No, I don't want to open it because I know once it's gone, I probably won't be able to get another one because like they just can't. I got gifted it from work. So I'm saving it though because so my brother lives at Ardlair, which is what their alternative whiskies named. So Ardlair
that's not the place that we took you originally to the guys who went to the wrong farm.
I gave you really good instructions. So it's Ardlair named after Stone Circle. So my brother lives up there. So I keep meaning, I thought it'd be really cool to go up to the Stone Circle and like sort of, I don't know, midsummer or something and take my bottle of Portwood up. But since then I got gifted actual samples of Ardlair from a friend. So I'm going to take them up there instead, I think, and maybe save my Portwood for something else. But yes, it is there.
I haven't said it in a while, but I would love to get the money to buy Ardmore, and Ardlair would be a core expression from my new maid.
I know. I absolutely adore. I mean, Glengarry, cheers everyone, is my first love, of course, but I adore Ardmore. It's just one of my favorite places to go. Whenever I get to do a tour, I just absolutely love it. It's fantastic.
People from see this time next year, people in America and all over the world are going to be thinking the Glengarry whiskey is called Glengarry. Cheers, everyone.
You never know, it might be.
Ben Marnick's watching on YouTube. Yeah, this is not unusual. This has happened a few times. The Cotswolds have come out with a peated release, but the peat comes from casks, not the barley. So they're using Exila cask, for example.
Well, like my Loch Lee is behind me. No, wait, wrong finger. The one that's sitting next to the peat.
Yeah, that's Lefroy cask.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So yeah, it's a great way for distilleries to trial peated whiskey without going through the rigmarole of getting a
cleaning everything out. Yeah.
If you imagine you run peated barley through your stills, through your fermentation tanks, through your mash tun, that stains, that lingers quite heavily. So usually it would be the last run before the summer shutdown or the winter shutdown if they're doing a peated run, because everything gets cleaned anyway. But peated casks are a great way of trialing it and see if it works and doing it that way. So yeah, it's a great way of doing something a bit different.
You get a nice kind of light, gentle peat kind of flavour, and I quite like the fact that Loch Lee are using them because they're on we don't know that they're Lefroy casks, but John Campbell, of course, is their distillery manager, so we can maybe assume that they're Lefroy ones.
99.9% assume.
But I like that there's a little bit of his past with with what he's doing now. I think it's a really nice tie-in, which I appreciate, to be honest.
Yeah. And I guess there's a little bit of unknown as well, because as we spoke, the age of the cask will have an influence on how much peat remains after a certain time. So when they put it in the cask, it's a hugely unknown factor. You imagine getting a cask that, I don't know, 30 years of maturing Lefroy, and then you get it for your peaty number. You might not get the same impact as you think.
I think with a lot of cask buying, though, the master blender or maybe the distillery manager, depending on who's doing it, a lot of it is nosing the cask beforehand. I know a lot of, decision making is based on just actually nosing the cask. So I'd imagine they'd maybe have an indicator of what they're getting and try and keep a sort of uniformity if they can. But you're right, yeah, the age of the cask is going to affect how much peat's going to come through at the end of maturation. So yeah, it's interesting. But I think with these smaller producers, they're more open to a little bit of variance as opposed to the bigger producers. But they're trying to keep a sort of consistency, uniformity. Because, with Lochleaf, for example, they're small batches. It doesn't necessarily need to say that it's going to be the same every single time. So I guess they have a little bit more leeway. Are you going to sneeze, Mike?
I thought I was, but I managed to snip it. Dave is asking if you could take your camera on a tour of your shelves.
No. Do you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to promise you, actually. When I get my shelf and I get all my whiskey off the floor, because there is so much on the floor, it's ridiculous.
Can we see your floor instead of a tour of your floor instead of a tour of your shelf?
It's embarrassing. No. Just no. When I get my actual shelf,
Please.
I will. Do you know? Don't spoil the surprise. When I get my shelf, I will have my whiskey display, and I've got all my whiskey books, and it will just look really cool, and you'll be like, "Wow, it was worth the wait."
Everyone's going to think it's a virtual background.
Yeah, no, there's no way I can show you the mess of that floor. I look like I've got a problem. Yeah, I'll get some shelves up and we'll do it properly. I'll do the grand reveal. I'll get like a wee red curtain and some like a ribbon and some gold scissors, and we'll do it properly. And I'll show you my my collection of whiskey. Dave, actually, I'll get you around to cut the ribbon. You're going to do the grand opening of put on like a tuxedo, and you can cut the ribbon, and we'll talk through my whiskey shelves. That's what's going to happen.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
That sounds good fun. I'm looking forward to that. When did you say that was happening?
Oh, well, when I finally buy this whiskey shelf, I will do it.
Last week you mentioned payday, which is next week.
Yeah.
2 weeks?
Yes. Yeah. It is. So I will buy my shelf, and I'll get my teenage son to construct it for me, because blooming flat pack gives me the actual rage. So I will get him to construct it for me, and then maybe next week, who knows? Maybe next week I'll have my whiskey shelves up.
Maybe. I love Willis. I hope you haven't. He's been quiet for the last kind of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and he's just popped up with 9.3 because he was asked. Let's have a scroll back. Rick asked him 20 minutes ago which Octomore it was he was drinking. So Willis is either, well, you maybe text his friend and that's the answer, but I'm hoping you haven't been digging through your boxes or looking through photos in your phone and ignoring the chat to find
down
out.
in the whiskey
9.3. Rick is now on the Glenlivet, 12 years old, but the bottle is about 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So that talks back to what we're talking with Katy about.
Yeah.
How the liquid, and I guess that it must be the hardest part of any blender's job is that consistency, using like a whole new set of tools and having to create the same work of art every time.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, painting by numbers, but not getting the numbers on the picture.
Just doing it by memory every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess as long as you can get so close that nobody notices from batch to batch, but then you do something from the start and then at the end you have a difference of like 20 years. It's going to be a massive difference. It might come full circle a couple of times, but
I know. I always think it's amazing. Just not only do they do that for like a core range for one distillery, quite often they're doing it for multiple distilleries, which, I mean, I guess there will be a kind of a set pattern, like a percentage of casks that they know from a certain, a kind of formula they're working off of, I guess. I don't know.
I was wondering if they did like almost a semi-Solera system where they would keep so much back in a vat, and then when they've got the new recipe, they pour that in to keep that consistency, and then let that marry together, and then pour out like 80% of that and keep 20% so the next lot goes in there. I was wondering if that was a technique of keeping consistency.
It might be, actually. It's something I've always wanted to find out more about, but I've never had the chance. I've never managed to get down to see the master blending side of things, but it'd be interesting, really interesting to see it.
One day.
Yeah.
It actually looks like that plant in your top shelf behind you is part of your hair.
Somebody said this to me. One of my pals texted me last week and said, your hair looks like it's just, it's like climbing at the top of your head, but no, it's just the plant. It's quite depressing that my hair looks so much like the plant, to be honest.
All that metal tea you've been drinking.
I know. Oh, I can't even let my hair down today. It's been such a mental day that my hair's just become ginormous. You always know my mental state judging on the size of my hair, to be honest. But Shelfgate, yes, it is becoming a bit of a saga. Rick, I'm going to remedy this very, very soon. How often do distilleries do core range releases? Every year. I think it depends on the distillery. I think it depends on, how much is required. So they make quite a lot of it, and then I think they kind of try to forecast the sales for the year, and they'll make it kind of based on that. But it depends distillery by distillery, because I think your smaller distilleries, it might be more of a set number for the year.
Guys like Springbank make, I think it's something like 16,000 bottles of 10-year-old a year. Yeah, and that's it. They don't have because of how they run, they can't just simply upscale, buy more barley in, like maybe somebody who needs more can. They make so much bottles and that's it for the year. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I guess it depends on what you mean by core range as well. So Glenallechy's 10-year-old is a core range, but it's done by batch. So I think he upped batch 9 was the first one. He really upped the range to about 19,000 bottles a year of that 10-year-old. Which made, and the reason for that was people were buying and collecting and going on shelf because it was quite limited. It would sell out almost immediately. So he almost tripled the production of it to try and stop that and say, well, it's going to be available every time now. But yeah, it's fine. It runs out, and then he puts the next batch on, just covering slight differences in maybe the cask makeup, the recipe, and the ABV as well. So although it's still a core range, it's very my daughter's ex-boyfriend made us nettle soup. He is no more. Is this some kind of online admission here, Willis? What have you done? What have you done?
Also, let's not lump people who make nettle soup into the same group as people who put Coke in their whiskey. Like, these are two different people.
Depends on the whiskey. Some whiskey goes quite well with Coke.
I just don't like Coca-Cola. It's
the Coke, not the whiskey, that's the problem.
Yeah, I don't like. Do you know, I don't like fizzy juice because the bubbles hurt my face. So I just don't like it. That's they do. They hurt my mouth. They hurt my nose. They make me burp. I don't understand why people like fizzy juice. I don't.
That is the best reason for not using any kind of fizzy juice as a mixer. I can't drink whiskey with Coke. It hurts my face. Most people, it hurts my pride or it hurts my status or my fervent belief that Coke is wrong. It hurts your face.
It just hurts my face. I know, Dave, I can't even partake in any of your, gin and Fanta, gin and all your amazing kind of combinations you create in your kitchen. It wouldn't be for me. Gin and Pepsi, there's another one. Look, I just couldn't do it. I'm sorry, Dave. I just can't partake.
Callum was working at a young farmer's disco last week, survived to tell a tale. You say there's still guys drinking whiskey and iron brew. I love whiskey and iron brew. I even have an iron brew can here, full, ready for that occasion when I open a whiskey and think, needs a splash of iron brew in that. I just think, as much as it's not a go-to for me, mixing whiskey with anything, as long as people are buying it, I don't really care what they do with it, to be honest. As long as you buy it from me, I don't care what you do with it. Mix it up, and if you're new to whiskey, don't be afraid to mix it. Don't be afraid to do something with it that makes it pleasing for you. And then over time, you might decide, well, actually, no, I'm going to give this a bash without it, and that aura of it, that strength is gone. You give it a bash.
Definitely. We should say goodbye to Rick. I've just seen his comment. He's off. Thanks for.
Oh, yes. Bye, Rick. We will see you next week, if not on the Aquavite Barfly chat this evening, which will be your afternoon, I guess.
A whole day of whiskey entertainment.
I know. I would love to be Rick, where you can just sit at home and watch podcasts and live videos on whiskey every Thursday.
I haven't seen any of Rick's his own videos recently. Either that's not coming on my Instagram feed, or he's maybe not done any recently. But I used to see his videos popping up.
Yeah, the Whiskey Zone.
Yeah, Instagram's a bit funny though, isn't it? It's like the algorithm. So maybe I just need to look for him again and then see if the algorithm will just kind of looked me out a bit. I'll need to go and have a look.
I haven't seen him either. Rick, if you're still on, if you're watching later, let us know if you're still doing your Whiskey Zone. Fizzy juice is a funny one, says Callum. Americans often ask me what we call pop or soda, and when I say fizzy juice, they laugh. Yeah, I guess it's different to them, isn't it?
I don't think fizzy is any less of a silly word than pop, because pop's obviously a describing word based on like the bubbles. Fizzy is a describing word based on the bubbles. We've just chosen a different adjective. So you should just turn that back around.
So would you call that, if you're describing the bubbles, sour juice?
Sour juice, yeah, torturous juice. Yeah. Hurty juice. The weird thing is, I don't mind a fizzy water, which is the weird thing, because I quite like I know, but I put fizzy water in my gin because I don't like tonic. So maybe I only like fizzy water because it's the only way I can drink gin. It's just become a lesser of evils because it's on my side to enable me to drink gin. But yeah, I don't know.
Water bottles don't hurt.
Maybe it's that. Maybe because they don't have sugar in them. Maybe it's the sugar in the bubbles, making them a little bit more volatile. That'll be what it is. Volatile bubbles.
I love how you started to bring scientific words into it to make it sound as if it's a legit excuse.
You say something enough confidence and people have to believe you. I make a living out of this. Trust me.
That's very true. That's very true. You should be a politician.
Well, yeah. Then I couldn't drink whiskey because you must never mix politics and whiskey. So
yeah, very true.
I might stick to whiskey first.
Well, I think we'll wrap up. I think we've talked enough nonsense for one evening.
I think so. Reached that stage.
It has. Well, Dave's got an interesting point. Have you tried gin with just water? Plain water?
I don't think I have.
Less hearty, more flavour?
That's... The water company should just describe water as that. Less hearty, more flavour. I might give that a go. That's a good point.
Do you know what I learned today?
What's that?
Sorry. Talking of water, you know the residents of Evian, which is where the spring where Evian water comes from, they get free water from the Evian spring. They can just tip up and take as much as they want.
Oh, I mean, that kind of makes sense. Because they live there, I guess. That's cool. Well, there you go. That's an interesting fact.
There you go.
Willis is saying his YouTube is frozen. We can still hear us. Well, it's okay because we're away to wrap up the night anyway, so you're not going to miss much. So I guess I should tell you who's on next week.
Let's do that.
Here. So next week we have Olivia Pattison. And she is. I wrote it down because I kept saying Patterson in my head, and I literally wrote it down so I wouldn't say Patterson, and I still got it wrong. Olivia Pattison, and she's the marketing coordinator for the Borders Distillery. But you might recognise her. She used to be part of Muddy McDavid, and she also has her own podcast as well. So she's Whiskey Live on Instagram. So she's going to pop on and have a wee chat with us next week.
I always get nervous when people who have podcasts come on because they're generally quite professional at this kind of thing.
Yes, and we just sit here and waffle and shite for a while.
I've heard some bad podcasts in my time, but no, that'll be great. Olivia's, I spoke to her when she was at Mary McDavid, and I'm sure it'd be good fun.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Well, guys, sorry.
No, I was just saying she knows her stuff, but yeah, carry
on. That's another Blether over. Thank you very much for sticking with us while we were guestless, without a guest for the last 40 minutes. And we'll hopefully see you next week. As I said right at the start, if you're watching and recording, you've made it this far, if you've got any questions, please feel free to fire them through. Any comments, please do ask. And we love to hear from you, even though we're not live. So we're going to sign off now. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great evening.
Thanks, guys.